He didn't flinch when the roof cracked or the smoke burned his lungs, because he heard it. A single whimper, soft and terrified, buried under the roar of fire. Minutes later, he stepped out. Not a hero, just a man holding a trembling puppy. But the family's response? That changed his life. Hi there, welcome to the Smart Intelligence channel. Before we dive into today's story, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Wishing you and your family good health and happiness. Now, let's get started. Mike Carson didn't look like the kind of man who chased flames for a living. He didn't walk with the swagger, didn't tell stories to impress. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen enough tragedy to know that real courage never announced itself. His boots were always worn. His turnout gear had faded edges and soot-stained cuffs. And yet, every crease told a story. 15 years on the job had carved a calm into him. He was the guy the rookies followed, not because he barked orders, but because he didn't panic. Even when he probably should have. He had this sixth sense, something in his eyes that read danger before alarms even went off. The kind of sense you didn't learn in training, but earned through moments when seconds meant the difference between rescue and recovery. Mike was 41 years old, unmarried, no kids. He lived alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment above an old bakery downtown. Every morning at 6 a.m., he jogged the same 5-mile loop past the train station, around City Park, and back down Jefferson Street. Never skipping, even on rainy days. He said the routine kept him sharp, but those close to him knew it was more than that. It was his way of staying in motion, because if he ever stopped long enough, the ghosts might catch up. He never talked much about his past, but everyone at Station 17 knew the story. Mike had lost his little sister Emily in a house fire when he was just 12. His parents had gone out for groceries, and Mike had been watching cartoons upstairs. He didn't smell the smoke until it was too late. Emily was trapped in her bedroom with the door closed. He tried to get to her. The heat pushed him back. By the time help arrived, it was over. That night etched itself into his bones. It was the night he stopped being a kid and started becoming a man who'd spend the rest of his life trying to make sure no one else went through what he did. When he turned 18, he joined the fire academy. While his friends were figuring out college majors, Mike was running drills, studying ventilation patterns, and memorizing building codes. But more than that, he was learning how to listen, not just to flames, but to silence. Because silence, he often said, is where the real cries live. That mindset made him a different kind of firefighter. He noticed the overlooked things, the trembling hand of an elderly woman on the curb, the forgotten photograph on a scorched mantle, the way a child clutched a stuffed animal like it was the last real thing left. Mike didn't just fight fires. He carried moments out of them. He wasn't flashy. He didn't make headlines. But inside the walls of Station 17, Mike was known as the anchor. The one who stayed calm when a stairwell collapsed. The one who crawled deeper when others couldn't go on. He never asked for thanks. He rarely accepted praise, but people noticed. Especially the new guys. One of them, a 23-year-old rookie named Darnell, once said, "Mike doesn't talk big, but if your world's on fire, you want his shadow next to you." That's who Mike was. The shadow in the smoke. The steady breath in chaos. Off-duty, he volunteered twice a month at the local animal shelter. No one at the station knew until one day he missed a post-fire debrief because he was busy walking dogs for an adoption event. When the chief asked about it, Mike just shrugged. "Saving lives comes in all shapes," he said. His locker was always neat. Everything folded just so. He kept an old Polaroid tucked inside. One of him and Emily, both holding popsicles in the backyard. Summer of '91. That photo had survived 2 decades and 3 station transfers. He said it reminded him why he did what he did. "She's the reason I run toward fire," he'd tell himself quietly, before every call. And that's what made him different. Mike didn't just wear the badge. He bore the weight of every name he couldn't save, every breath he couldn't give back. But he never let it crush him. He let it fuel him. So when the call came that night, a 2-alarm house fire on the east side, unknown number of occupants, He didn't hesitate, just like he hadn't for the past 15 years. Boots on, coat zipped, gear in hand, Mike moved like muscle memory. Not faster than anyone else, just truer. He wasn't looking to be a hero. He was just doing what he always did, listening for the silence no one else noticed. He had no idea that this time the silence would be broken by a whimper so soft, it would change everything. The radio crackled just past midnight. 2-alarm fire, residential, east side. Unknown if occupants remained inside. Mike Carson slid into the back of engine 7, checked his oxygen levels, and secured his gear. No wasted motion. No small talk. The air was thick, not with smoke yet, but with that quiet tension before everything breaks loose. When they arrived, the house was already half swallowed by fire. Flames crawled along the porch like angry vines, windows blown out from the pressure. The orange glow lit the street like a twisted sunrise. Neighbors stood barefoot on sidewalks, some in tears, some clutching phones. A woman with a bloodied knee screamed, "My puppy! He's still in there!" Mike turned instinctively. Her voice cracked through the noise like a bell. She was pointing at the house, her hand shaking. Most firefighters wouldn't risk it. Not for a pet. Standard protocol said no re-entry if all human occupants were accounted for. But Mike didn't hesitate. He didn't see a dog. He saw a life and a woman whose world was on the verge of shattering. He adjusted his mask, dropped low, and slipped into the smoke. Inside, the heat was immediate, like walking into a furnace. Visibility was nearly zero. The temperature had already climbed past 900 degrees Fahrenheit near the ceiling, so he crawled, staying in the survivable layer just above the floor. He shouted once, short and low, "Puppy, come here, buddy!" Nothing. Then again, softer this time, he tapped the floor. Still nothing. He moved room by room, heart pounding but steady, relying on sound and memory. The furniture crackled. Wood moaned overhead. His oxygen hissed in rhythm with every breath. In the back corner of what looked like a laundry room, he heard it. A tiny whimper. High-pitched, faint, almost imagined. He spun toward the sound. Beneath a tipped-over basket and some scorched towels, something moved. Mike dropped flat, reached under, and pulled out a small ball of trembling fur. A tan and white puppy, no bigger than a loaf of bread, eyes wide, chest heaving, paws covered in soot. The little thing didn't even struggle. It just curled into Mike's chest as if it knew. He tucked the puppy inside his jacket, zipped it up halfway, and began the crawl back. The roof above groaned loud enough to make his heart spike. He didn't have minutes, he had seconds. Twice, he had to stop and wait as flaming debris collapsed ahead of him. The heat licked at his arms. His vision blurred from the sweat inside his mask. But every time he thought about pausing, he felt the puppy's tiny heartbeat against his chest. And he moved again. When he finally emerged through the front door, blackened with soot, arms cradled around his jacket, the entire street gasped. The woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "That's Max!" she cried. "That's my baby!" Mike knelt beside her, unzipped the jacket, and gently passed the puppy into her arms. The dog licked her face instantly, tail thumping weakly. People clapped, someone started filming, but Mike didn't notice. He just stood up, nodded to the chief, and walked back toward the engine. His oxygen tank was nearly empty. His gloves were charred, but his eyes? Steady as ever. Later that night, back at the station, nobody said much. They didn't need to. Someone handed him a fresh bottle of water. Another tossed him a protein bar. The only real moment came from the rookie, Darnell, who looked at him and whispered, "You went back in for a dog." Mike shrugged. It wasn't just a dog to her. He didn't do it for a viral moment. He didn't do it for medals or news stories. He did it because 15 years ago, no one could get to his sister in time, and he had promised himself, quietly, deeply, unshakably, that if he ever could be that person for someone else, he would. The next morning, the video had already made it to local news. By noon, it hit national headlines. Firefighter risks life to save family dog. But Mike didn't care about the cameras or the praise. He just wanted to know if Max made it through the night. And what he didn't know, not yet, was that Max's family wasn't done with him. Not by a long shot. 3 days passed. Mike returned to the station for his usual 24-hour shift. No interviews, no follow-up. He ignored the buzzing on his phone. Dozens of missed calls, media requests, messages from people he hadn't heard from in years. That kind of attention made him uncomfortable. He wasn't doing anything heroic, just what needed to be done. That morning, just as he was tightening his gloves for an equipment check, the firehouse bell rang. Not the alarm bell, the front door bell. Strange. Most people didn't walk in unannounced, not unless they were lost or grieving. Darnell peeked through the window. Mike, you might want to see this. Standing outside were 6 people, all dressed in crisp black. At the center, the woman whose dog he'd saved. She was holding a small box wrapped in navy blue velvet. In her other hand, Max, freshly bathed, tail wagging, rested comfortably in her arms. Mike met them at the front, still in uniform. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. The woman stepped forward, eyes glossy but proud. "You didn't give us your name," she said, "but someone at dispatch remembered your badge, so we found you." He shifted awkwardly. "Really wasn't necessary." "But it is," she replied, "because I didn't tell you everything that night." She paused, nodded toward the man beside her, a tall, silver-haired gentleman with a posture like a judge and a face vaguely familiar. The kind you see in magazines, shaking hands with mayors or cutting ribbons at grand openings. "I'm Victoria Monroe," she said, "and this is my father, Thomas Monroe." Mike blinked. The name sounded familiar, but it didn't click. "He's the founder and CEO of the Monroe Foundation," she continued, "the country's largest nonprofit for animal disaster relief." Now it clicked. The Monroe Foundation had funded hundreds of rescue programs nationwide, built mobile vet clinics, flown out to war zones, partnered with FEMA during hurricane seasons. Thomas Monroe wasn't just a philanthropist. He was a legend in the world of emergency response and animal welfare. "We were in town scouting sites for a new shelter expansion," Victoria said. "And Max, he's not just my dog. He's the face of our foundation. He was rescued himself during Hurricane Harvey and became our campaign ambassador." Mike looked down at Max, who blinked back innocently. Thomas stepped forward now. "You didn't know who we were. You didn't stop to ask. You went in for him because you knew he mattered. That kind of integrity, we don't see it often anymore." He opened the velvet box and turned it toward Mike. Inside was a solid gold badge. On it, engraved in delicate lettering, "For Valor Beyond the Call. Michael Carson. Presented by the Monroe Foundation." But that wasn't the real twist. Victoria handed him a second envelope, white with a gold seal. "This is a formal invitation," she said. "We're offering you a national role, Director of First Response Training for our new initiative, teaching firefighters across the U.S. how to safely incorporate pet rescue into fire protocol. Paid relocation, 6-figure salary, full benefits. But more than that, a chance to lead something bigger." Mike stood frozen. In all his years, no one had ever offered him anything like that. He'd never even considered leaving Station 17. It wasn't just a job. It was his family, his purpose. But then Thomas said something that cut through his hesitation. "We don't want to take you away from firefighting, Mike. We want the world to learn from you." Behind them, someone was recording. But the scene wasn't staged. It wasn't viral bait. It was simply gratitude, raw and quiet, landing like a soft weight on Mike's shoulders. For the first time in years, his voice cracked. "I don't know what to say." Victoria smiled. "You don't have to say anything. You've already said enough, with your actions." Then Max barked once, sharp and cheerful, as if to seal the deal. And just like that, the man who had spent his life avoiding the spotlight found himself standing at the center of a story much bigger than fire. Mike sat alone that night in the back corner of Station 17's locker room, the envelope still unopened on the bench beside him. He could hear the others outside, Darnell laughing, the crew swapping stories, a pot of stale coffee brewing. But for now, the world had gone quiet again. And in that quiet, he was 12 years old all over again, standing in the hallway, smoke crawling up the walls, reaching for a doorknob that burned his skin, losing Emily. He took a breath. Then he opened the envelope. Inside was more than just an offer. It was a letter, handwritten, from Thomas Monroe himself. We spend millions building systems and responses, but systems don't crawl back into burning homes. People do. Good people. Quiet people. People like you. Let's build a future where compassion is as trained as courage. Lead the way, Mike. We'll follow. Thomas. Mike folded the letter slowly. He didn't cry. He just let the silence settle, like it always had, then walked outside to find the chief. The next morning, he submitted his resignation, not because he wanted to leave Station 17, not because the job had worn him down, but because, for the first time, he saw that his story might mean something to others. Not just to Max, not just to Victoria, but to every firefighter who'd ever faced the question, do I go back in? 2 weeks later, the city hosted a private farewell ceremony. It wasn't televised. Mike had refused the press. Still, the entire department came. His old academy instructor flew in from out of state. Kids from the animal shelter he'd volunteered at made signs. And Max, the little dog with the singed paws and brave heart, walked down the aisle with a firefighter helmet in his mouth, placing it at Mike's feet like an offering. Even Mike couldn't help but laugh at that. But what broke him, what truly undid him, was what happened next. The chief stepped forward, said only 4 words. You saved more than one. Then, one by one, firefighters from across the region stood and recited stories. Times when they hesitated and remembered Mike. Times they heard about Max's rescue and decided to dig just a little deeper, crawl just a little farther. He hadn't just changed policy. He'd changed instinct. Mike didn't move to a mansion. He didn't trade his fire boots for fancy suits. He stayed in a 2-bedroom condo near the Foundation's training center. On the wall was the same Polaroid of him and Emily with their popsicles. Framed now. Restored. His days were filled with classrooms and firehouses, training sessions and conference calls. He built modules on pet rescue safety protocols, started scholarships for the children of fallen firefighters, and once flew to Kentucky in the middle of a flood just to help rescue a dog trapped on a roof. He wasn't chasing legacy. He was answering something quieter. One evening, months later, he received a letter from a small-town department in Iowa. Inside was a photograph. A young firefighter holding a cat in his arms, smiling through tears and ash. The caption read, "Because of what you did, I didn't hesitate. Thank you for being first in." Mike placed the photo next to the one of Emily. No headlines, no speeches. Just another reminder that heroism isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper that echoes for years. And that was how Mike Carson, the man who never looked for recognition, who never thought his life was extraordinary, ended up changing the way a nation understood bravery. He didn't do it with words. He did it by running back in. If Mike's story moved you, don't let it end here. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in quiet heroes again. Comment below if you've ever witnessed or experienced an act of selfless courage. And if you believe the world needs more people like Mike, hit that like button and subscribe. Because we've got more stories just like his, and trust us, they're going to restore your faith in humanity. 1 year later, Mike returned to Station 17, quietly, unannounced. This time, not as a firefighter, but as a guest speaker for the new rookie class. He didn't talk about medals or viral clips. He talked about silence, about instincts, about Max. And when a young recruit asked, "How do you know when to go back in?" Mike simply smiled and said, "When it's no longer about you." The room fell silent. And just like that, another generation understood what it meant to be an everyday hero.